people frequently ask me about that and ask me what's Mrs. Brown's secret. Additionally, I'm not sure if Mrs. Brown has any secrets. She is a bitch. And I don't. She loves her children. You know. Furthermore, I believe she is at a stage in life when she doesn't give a damn about what she says. Fans have been watching the chaos and crazy matriarch at the center of the BBC's long-running sitcom Mrs. Brown's Boys for more than 10 years. Despite all of the laughter on film, something else was going on behind the scenes. Actors have reportedly departed due to wage disparities and other startling disclosures about the backstage politics that viewers were unaware of, according to recent reports. What actually took place behind the scenes then? What made them quit the sitcom? Come along as we examine the true motivations behind these actors' departures from Mrs. Brown's Boys. Viewers adore the comedy, while reviewers despise it. About 4 years ago, a highly unexpected event occurred in the comedy industry that no critic had anticipated. In a public survey, Brown's Boys, a sitcom on the BBC, was named the best British sitcom of the 21st century. That may seem typical, but there's a catch. It was viewed negatively by critics. They had referred to it as immature, lacking in skill, and completely unfunny. It was even called sluggish, the end of sheer rubbish, and rooted in the 1970s by another reviewer. Millions of spectators, however, were casting their votes with their emotions as critics rolled their eyes. This is hardly the first time audiences and critics have been at odds. Similar challenges were encountered by shows such as My Family, Citizen Khan, and The Big Bang Theory. However, the disparity is like a huge canyon in Brendan O'Carroll's Mrs. Brown's Boys. Despite the negative reviews, the show is nevertheless immensely popular, drawing millions of people each year for its Christmas specials. Brendan O'Carroll himself plays the foul-mouthed Irish mammy Agnes Brown, who is at the center of it all. His own mother, who had 11 children on very little money, served as the model for the role. Breaking the fourth wall is one of the show's defining characteristics, and it takes place in the Brown family home. Agnes frequently addresses the camera directly, and rather than correcting errors, the show frequently uses retakes, broken props, and line flubbing for comedic effect. However, the obscene jokes and ridiculous setups are what really keep the supporters giggling. For instance, Grandad Brown, 92, becomes ill in the first episode, and a doctor advises that he requires a rectal reading. "Are you going to assist Mrs. Brown?" he queries. With fecund joy, Agnes responds happily and puts on a rubber glove. The crowd roared. It was brash, silly, and a little out of control, basically an adult pantomime. Additionally, Brendan O'Carroll's journey to fame was anything but typical, as the show actually started on stage before being broadcast on television. Before attempting stand-up comedy, he worked as a waiter, milkman, DJ, and in a variety of other occupations after dropping out of school at the age of 11. Mrs. Brown was initially made for a radio soap opera. Additionally, O'Carroll filled in for the actress who was scheduled to play her after she became ill. That fortunate mishap became his big break. It wasn't all laughter, though. O'Carroll once squandered millions of dollars on a self-financed movie called Sparrow's Trap that was never produced. He went back to Mrs. Brown, this time as a theatrical act, to recuperate. Stephen McCrum, a BBC producer, was in the crowd one evening. He subsequently described how the energy in the theater that night nearly convinced him in miracles, despite the fact that he was not religious. Teenagers and elderly ladies were laughing uncontrollably. McCrum was aware that he had discovered something unique. Of course, not everyone was in agreement. Critics said Mrs. Brown's Boys wouldn't even last a season when it finally debuted on BBC One. Audiences, however, disproved them. There were 2.9 million viewers by the third episode. The special drew 6.6 million viewers that Christmas. After that, the numbers simply continued to rise. The odd thing is that the show seems to get more popular the more critics bash it. The Guardian described it as O'Carroll's cliched, obscene vehicle. Vice noted that witnessing grown-ups act in such a manner was embarrassing. It was even dubbed the worst comedy ever produced by some. Fans, however, thought otherwise. The UK box office was dominated by Mrs. Brown's Boys. Records were broken by the live world tour. In Britain, Even venues were packed with Mrs. Brown's Boys Down musical. As a result, audiences continue to purchase tickets and laugh while reviewers continue to shake their heads. It appears that Miss Brown's Boys has discovered a secret formula that detractors cannot shatter, regardless of how frequently it is ridiculed. Agnes Brown, Brendan O'Carroll's corporeal alter ego, keeps proving one thing. Even if the reviewers disagree, sometimes the people know best. However, what occurs when changes behind the scenes affect the laughing on screen? Rory Brown's curtains close. Roy ended his 6-year tenure as one of television's most iconic comedic characters in 2017 when he discreetly left the program. Starting with Rory Cowan, the adored actor who portrayed the flamboyant and witty hairdresser Rory Brown on the popular BBC sitcom. Rory had been struggling with his own feelings of discontent and exhaustion behind the laughing and wild antics that fans loved on television, and this finally caused him to decide to quit. Rory acknowledged that his happiness had been declining for over 2 years prior to his leaving in an interview with the Irish Daily Mail. For the past 18 months to 2 years, I had not been content with my job at Mrs. Brown's Boys. I thought it was time to leave because I think 26 years is enough. Rory had thought about leaving earlier, despite his internal conflict. However, the show's creator and the actor who played the renowned matriarch herself, Brendan O'Carroll, convinced him to stay a bit longer. Rory clarified that on June 16, 2017, he gave O'Carroll his notice with the intention of departing right away, but Rory agreed when O'Carroll begged him to stay on till the London O2 shows were over. The actor said that his last moments on set were modest, as he packed his things in a plain plastic bag and left the location in silence. Despite the sudden departure, Rory emphasized that he and O'Carroll, whom he had known for almost 20 years, had no animosity. Following Rory's departure, O'Carroll also paid respect to him, comparing it to a sports hero quitting their team. We all feel that Ronaldo left Manchester United, but he went on to achieve incredible success, and I have no doubt that Rory will do the same, he said. He also praised Cowan's enormous on-screen and off-screen contributions to the program, calling him a key factor in Mrs. Brown's Boys' legacy's success. Rory's on-screen and stage performances, including the 2017 Christmas special, came to a stop with his departure. After that, Damien McKiernan replaced him in the holiday episodes, recasting his role. Rory acknowledged on the Ray Darcy show on RTE Radio 1 that he was not interested in watching his successor perform. He said he was bored and unmotivated by the task because it felt stale due to the BBC format's repetition. Cowan has maintained his career in entertainment despite stepping away from the spotlight, making appearances in other films like Tipping Point. It's evident from looking back on his time with Mrs. Brown's Boys that he left in search of fresh challenges and creative fulfillment rather than conflict. Rory Cowan's exit signifies the end of a chapter and the possibility of fresh starts after years of working on one of Ireland's most well-liked sitcoms. But it was Rory's discontent that started the issues. What else was going on behind the scenes in this beloved sitcom? Backstage fights behind the laughs. The production has been clouded by recent claims that two players, Damien McKiernan and Gary Hollywood, opted to leave the show due to disagreements over compensation and working conditions. A long-standing salary disparity between the main cast and Brendan O'Carroll's family, who comprise a sizable section of the actors, is at the heart of the problem. According to reports, McKiernan and Hollywood, who portray Dino and Rory, found that their pay was significantly lower than that of other cast members, many of whom are related to O'Carroll. The performers became discouraged and frustrated upon learning that their efforts were not being given the same weight. The working environment, according to an insider, is quite upstairs and downstairs, with a distinct separation between the actors and the family member. According to the source, the family is constantly taken care of, and all of them are directors of the Mrs. Brown's Boys producing firm. Brendan is free to do what the BBC pleases. According to the source, the cast members who are not related to O'Carroll have become tense, resentful, and feel unfairly treated as a result of this hierarchical structure. The problem was not just the wage dispute. According to reports, Damien and Gary were not included in the 2020 Christmas specials. Damien was just told that his character would be completely written out, but Gary would only be in one of the episodes. According to reports, this decision left the performers feeling bewildered and devalued. The situation grew intolerable for Damien and Gary. Gary made the decision to leave the show after realizing that his position in the next specials would be minimal. Damien did the same after being written out. A longtime mainstay of BBC comedy, the departures represent a major upheaval for the show. Their choice to quit the show and reveal the bias, however, only touched the tip of the iceberg. And what more was found? The dynamics that go on behind the scenes. Although Brendan O'Carroll has not commented on his own pay, his success is widely known. In 2013, his net worth was reported to be close to €10 million. According to subsequent reports, his entertainment company, BOCPIX Ltd., nearly doubled its profits in 2018 to 58. In 2017 and 2018, Brendan and his spouse Jennifer Dibney received dividends from the business totaling over €2 million. He also makes a lot of money touring. Mrs. Brown's Boys began with a little radio drama that O'Carroll wrote in. Later he wrote 4 books, one of which was made into a 1999 film with Angelica Houston in the lead. He established a theater group, initially named Mrs. Brown's Boys, and enlisted friends and family to act because he was determined to realize his dream on stage. When the actress who was supposed to play Agnes Brown failed to appear one evening, O'Carroll famously dressed up in drag. Later, this stage production evolved into the popular sitcom that made its broadcast premiere in 2011, inspiring other stage productions and a D-movie version. Despite its popularity, the backstage life of the program is very different from the humor that is seen on TV. The cast of the show is dominated by O'Carroll's family, as evidenced by the appearances of his wife Jennifer, sister Eilish, son Danny, and daughter Fiona. Miss Brown's Boys always appeared to be a single happy family from the outside. Fans felt like they were a part of something cozy and crazy as the actors teased one another in interviews, laughed through bloopers, and told anecdotes. Behind the scenes, however, a completely different story was being told, one that was influenced by both skill and pedigree. A strict inner circle and a hierarchy that wasn't always apparent to outsiders were produced by this familial approach, even though it gave the series charm and formed a part of its personality. Over time, the family-first system's drawbacks became apparent to several longtime cast members. Compared to the O'Carrolls, actors who had been with the show since its early stages started to notice trends, such as lower pay, fewer lines, and less visibility on television. Being close to Brendan was more important than talent or loyalty. It's a velvet rope system, according to the former cast member. Members of the circle took part in brainstorming sessions, had a say in their character development, and were given significant screen time. Outside, people watched and waited. With time, the disparity became more obvious. While the roles of other performers diminished or vanished completely, the O'Carroll family took center stage in specials and major plotlines. The cast was tense because of a subtle, systemic inequity rather than overt animosity or hatred. Backstage muttering annoyances spread, and the inner club became an unofficial moniker. Although it was informal, it detailed a small, dependable group that was incorporated into the production by marriage, family ties, or years of devotion. Did Branson ever recognize this widening gap? An alternative viewpoint. Brendan finally acknowledged this connection after much discussion, describing it as trust rather than favoritism. Speaking with pride, he praised the dependability and dedication of those who had been with him from the start. However, even the appearance of nepotism can cause significant rifts in a field where opportunities and recognition are crucial. Being close to relatives wasn't the only goal of the inner club. It influenced the social and creative atmosphere of the show. Membership in this circle was frequently reflected in choices about who was included in specials, whose lines were important, and whose plots were given priority. Outside actors were largely ignored, their contributions were not as well known, and their issues were often ignored. The effects were palpable. Some players discreetly quit the production as tensions increased, and roles dwindled. Although Dino and Rory's exits garnered media attention, many people were unaware of the underlying cause. When familiar faces disappeared, fans who were drawn to the sitcom's ideals of love, support, and togetherness were left perplexed. The promoted warmth of the show ran counter to the realities of a production where creative influence and job security were frequently determined by one's position within or outside the trusted group. While individuals in the circle prospered, longtime members who weren't related to the O'Carroll family were occasionally pushed aside. However, there was still more to discover. The 2017 Paradise Papers leak, which exposed some of the wealthiest people's hidden offshore accounts and tax arrangements, shocked the world. Particularly noticeable was the consequences for Mrs. Brown's Boys. 3 cast members were implicated: Patrick Houlihan, Martin Delaney, and Fiona O'Carroll. Fiona, the daughter of Brendan O'Carroll, portrayed Maria Brown, Longtime member Patrick brought life to Dermot, while her then-husband Martin played Trevor. All of a sudden, these well-known faces became associated with complex financial maneuvers and offshore accounts, rather than jokes. The three allegedly transferred more than €2 million of their profits into Mauritius-based offshore company. A legal accounting method frequently employed to reduce tax burden, these money were subsequently returned as loans. Although nothing they did was illegal in theory, the visuals were startling. The show's working-class charm and celebration of ordinary Irish life have long been loved by viewers. Now, well-liked actors were linked to practices that didn't seem to fit with that philosophy. The public's reaction was harsh and quick, outrage erupted on social media, and tabloids splattered their pages with derogatory headlines. Viewers found it difficult to reconcile the show's realistic portrayal of its stars hiding money abroad with its blue-collar, down-to-earth image. There were many questions. How did a series that was founded on common hardships become entangled in a web of financial jargon and loopholes? Brendan O'Carroll, the creator, was mostly mute as well. As the show's spokesperson and main character, many anticipated a forceful reaction or justification. Rather, O'Carroll made few remarks, his reserved demeanor fostering conjecture and doubt. Morale was shattered backstage by the revelation. Colleagues betrayed some cast members, others were concerned about the show's reputation in the long run. According to reports, the formerly united team started to feel split as conversations became confrontational. As the meticulously constructed public image of familial friendliness clashed with a more complex, behind-the-scenes reality, the once close-knit production now carried the unseen weight of suspicion. Two important members of the cast of the program became even more estranged when Martin Delaney and Fiona O'Carroll's marriage terminated in divorce. The emotional and financial constraints at work were reflected in the disintegration of what had once been a literal family on and off screen. The impact of the tax revelations persisted even though they eventually stopped making news. Although there were no legal repercussions or charges brought against the broadcast, its reputation as a family-friendly program was definitely damaged. The Paradise Papers scandal reminded viewers that appearances may be deceiving. Mrs. Brown's Boys' warmth, laughter, and mayhem concealed a world where loyalty, authority, and individual choices all converged in untidy ways. The controversy added a level of intricacy that viewers couldn't ignore, but it didn't halt the show's development or diminish its appeal. A reminder that behind closed doors, even the happiest houses can have dark sides. What was the last straw that caused the significant consequence? The aftermath, the F-word, and Mrs. Brown's Boys' evolving personalities. Perception is crucial in television. Humor, humility, and anarchic charm were the show's foundations, and any whiff of scandal could shatter that. And Mrs. Brown's Boys encountered a storm in 2018 that had little to do with bloopers or banter. Rather, it was a battle over language and artistic control that demonstrated how passionately Brendan O'Carroll protected his work. The BBC intended to move the show to an earlier 8 p.m. time slot because of its steady ratings. Slot, a great time to watch with the family. The sole prerequisite, reduce the profanity to adhere to pre-watershed regulations. But O'Carroll declined. According to reports, he informed executives, the show is the show, set it for 8, 10, or 12 o'clock. It will be found by those who wish to see it. I will not alter it. There was more to his defiance than obstinacy. It was a declaration. Propriety and polish have never been important to Mrs. Brown's Boys. It felt authentic because of its disorder, messiness, and yes, colorful language. For O'Carroll, it would have been a betrayal to compromise on that voice. But there were repercussions for the choice. The show might have hindered its viewership development by turning down the primetime slot. The series remained inaccessible to younger audiences who may have learned about it. Some cast members reportedly objected to being left out of the decision behind the scenes, since they knew that a better time slot may result in greater possibilities and bonuses. Additionally, this creative control touched on more general backstage problems. The show's signature live performances started to feel sloppy when actors broke character, cameras caught staff, ad-libs gone wrong, and other flaws that formerly pleased spectators started to show. Supporters started to wonder if the bloopers were real or contrived. Although O'Carroll maintained that the presentation was inherently unpredictable, both critics and devoted spectators observed a slight change. What had formerly given Mrs. Brown's Boys its spontaneity was evaporating. Meanwhile, The problem was made worse by the departure of important cast members. Both on and off screen, the camaraderie that had made the program feel like a true family was broken by replacing familiar characters. When new actors took over, the spontaneity and affection started to seem phony. Critical evaluations became harsher, and Christmas specials, which were once enormous television events, became shorter and fewer. Plots were predictable, jokes were cliched, and the enthusiasm was less contagious. Fans began to take note as well. Question-filled forums and comment section. Had the show become dull? Was O'Carroll unwilling to change and stuck to a formula that didn't work anymore? There was a trace of hollowness in the laughing, which had formerly been loud and sincere. But in spite of everything, Miss Brown's Boy's wild energy, unrestrained humor, and inclusive spirit persisted. Viewers continued to tune in for the chaos, even if the original cast had broken up and the drama behind the scenes had come to the surface. Perfection was not the focus of the series. It was about becoming a part of O'Carroll's living, untidy world. How did this popular sitcom survive the storms that almost brought it to ruin? Mrs. Brown's Boys still succeeds. Many people have been perplexed as to why Miss Brown's Boys has managed to survive despite harsh criticism and current difficulties. Brendan O'Carroll acknowledged in 2013 that he was not entirely sure why, but by the time the series received 14,000 votes in a Radio Times survey and was named the best sitcom of the century, he had a potential answer. He felt that a certain demographic of viewers had been overlooked by contemporary humor. He claimed that television executives had primarily targeted youthful audiences between the ages of 18 and 25 and had treated humor as the new rock and roll. They had neglected the conventional audience in the process, the ones who used to enjoy programs like Are You Being Served? He maintained that the honor was evidence that this underrepresented group had at last regained its voice. Danny Cohen, a former director of the BBC, backed the proposal by pointing out that the show had one of the highest ratings for audience appreciation in a long time. Connecting with those who no longer recognized themselves in contemporary sitcoms was the key to its popularity, he claimed. The Office, The Thick of It, Spaced, and Peep Show were among the oddball and unconventional sitcoms that gained popularity after even the few big hits that did make in, like Miranda or Outnumbered, were mostly middle class and located in London. On the other hand, Mrs. Brown's Boys depicted an Irish working-class family, which is not often depicted on cinema. In a humorous manner, one of the episodes emphasized this distinction. Mrs. Brown purchased a shamrock-shaped smart assistant. When she changed the setting, the device's accent shifted from a fancy English one to an Irish one that was far more casual and grounded. Although it was a minor joke, it demonstrated how the show could relate to regular people. The sitcom's family-oriented production was another factor in its popularity. During a preview event, O'Carroll revealed that almost all of the cast members had experience working behind the scenes, so they were aware of the amount of labor required to keep the program going. According to him, this strengthened the sense of teamwork. There had also been discussion about the frequent use of profanity. According to O'Carroll, a BBC executive reportedly warned him that until he toned it down, he would never become a major star. He said that the show needed to be true to itself, and that he had no desire to become a star. Jennifer Gibney backed up this argument by pointing out that in Ireland, phrases like feck, or even more derogatory ones, were just as common as pauses and punctuation. Additionally, surveys provided intriguing insights into the audience. Critics were mainly middle class, but supporters were from a variety of backgrounds. According to a YouGov study, 62% of supporters have cast ballots in favor of Brexit. This was interpreted by some critics as an indication of a cultural gap between elites and working-class viewers. In a blog post, Labour MP Stella Creasy implied that Mrs. Brown's Boys' popularity demonstrated a widening divide between the people and the ruling class. Others countered that despite their reluctance to publicly acknowledge it, many middle-class viewers also found the show enjoyable. Another level of explanation was provided by scholars. According to Dublin lecturer John Fagan, the show provided older women and their desires a unique voice. He pointed out that women were frequently depicted in classic sitcoms as either unattractive spinsters or glamorous fantasy. According to him, Mrs. Brown's Boys deviated from this norm by enabling middle-aged women to playfully express their sexuality, humor, and assertiveness. Regardless of how it is interpreted, the show's popularity has not diminished. When O'Carroll looked back on his life, he said that although he had started training as a waiter at the age of 14, he had been grateful for a second opportunity every day since he and Mrs. Brown found success. Finale, questions were raised by the show's development. Could it regain the enchantment of its infancy? Would it withstand the combined strains of changing audience preferences, cast turnover, and creative rigidity? Let us know what you think by leaving a comment. For more, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the following video that appears on your screen as well. You'll like